If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fists. My name is Frank Latirzo, full-time observer, part-time writer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the BWAA, that is Boxing Writers Association of America. And Jack, let me just get this off my chest. For 3 years, I have to hear how I just fought. I was a former fighter, and you fought in the New York Golden Gloves. Did you win the Golden Gloves?
No. But listen, I held my own against Vito Antuofermo in the gym. That's even more.
Okay, well, I did that with Benny Briscoe and Michael Spinks.
Yeah, but Vito. Oh, Michael Spinks. I mean, Michael Spinks is going easy on you the whole time. I mean, let's be honest about it. Benny Briscoe probably not as easy, and you could tell us about that.
And he was, and he. Well, we know he was better than Antuofermo, but Vito was tough.
Vito beat Benny Briscoe. He beat him at Madison Square Garden.
He was a fossil then, Jack. He was a fossil. What year was that?
I think that was like 77, maybe 76. It's after Briscoe fought Monzon.
Was it after he fought Hagler? It was before he fought Hagler, right? Before Benny fought Hagler.
Yeah, before he was champion, when Vito was on the way up and Benny was a little past it. Benny wasn't as motivated then, according to Russell Peltz. We're going to have Russell Peltz on as a future guest. And
Russell and Benny both said they won that fight.
No, Russell admitted to me in private he could deny it. Now he thought Vito won the fight, that Benny lost the fight. And now
I only know what Benny thinks.
And then when a few people chimed in and they thought Benny was robbed, Russell changed his tune to was very close. It was a close fight. Listen, I had Vito winning 6 rounds to 3 with 1 even. Benny was up 3-2-1 in rounds going into round 7, and Vito won the last 4.
I never saw the fight, Jack, believe it or not.
The commentators thought that Benny won the fight. And a funny thing about it, when I talked to Vito about that, on 3 occasions. The first time I talked to Vito about it, strangely enough, he said, I thought I was lucky to get the decision. The first time we ever spoke about it. Then I spoke to him about it a couple of years later, and he said it was a close fight. He thought he won the fight. But, Vito's normally very honest in matters like that. And then
Benny thinks he won every fight.
The third time I thought, he said, yeah, I definitely won the fight, but Benny was past his prime. He wasn't the same Benny Briscoe that fought Rodrigo Valdez, Vito told me, because Vito was at ringside for one of the Briscoe Valdez fight to win in Italy. And he said, what a fight. He was on the edge of his seat. So he admitted Benny wasn't the same fighter. So he wasn't taking credit for beating the best of Benny Briscoe. Listen, you and I like to talk, at least I like to, if they fought 10 times. Look, if Benny and Vito fought 10 times, one of them was going to win 3 times, the other 7, 6-4, maybe 5-5. If they were at their best, it would be closer to 5-5, I think, than anything else.
The thing is, Vito did win the title and Benny never did.
Benny had his chances, though, but Benny's problem was Rodrigo Valdez, plain and simple, and Carlos
Monzon.
And when you look at, Benny fought well against Valdez. He got stopped in one fight, but, he fought well on balance.
The other 2 were close.
Well enough to win. And against Monzon, no one ever hurt Monzon that badly in Monzon's whole career. The way
in the 9th round.
Did. But that was his misfortune. Sometimes it's a misfortune. It's level of competition. And Valdez was elected to the Hall of Fame this year. And Monzon, as we know, is, an all-time great, arguably. I like to use the word arguably because it doesn't mean I believe it, but you could make an argument that Monzon was the greatest middleweight of all time, and no one's going to say you're being
Jack, some people
ridiculous.
think that.
No,
Some people think that. He has a good case. He has a good case.
Right. If I told you a fighter, for example, like Hugo Coro, who beat Rocky Graziano, a popular fighter. If I say, I think Rocky Graziano was the greatest middleweight of all time, you'd say, get out of here. We loved Rocky, but come on. You lose all credibility. But certain fighters, if we say they were the best of all time, a lot of people are going to disagree, but you could make a good argument,
Monzon is in the running with Hagler, Harry Greb, Robinson, and himself, to me. And Mickey Walker is in that conversation too.
But Mickey, you know what it is? They only fought once, but Greb did edge Walker out. And if you look at Greb's body of work, it was a little better than Walker's. So,
but Jack, look at Mickey Walker though. He drop Schmeling or Sharkey.
No, you should.
And he drew with Schmeling, and Sharkey beat him, but I think he dropped one of them. I forget now. I'm getting old.
Someone's looking down on you now, and it's not Mac. Maybe him too, but someone's looking down on you, and they're saying this Laterzo has no clue what he's talking about. Hirsch doesn't know much, but Laterzo knows even less. You left out Stanley Ketchel, Nat Fleischer. That's his guy, the greatest middleweight of all time. The
Jack,
Michigan assassin up for
I would put every guy I named. Every guy I named, I would pick to beat Ketchel, who was Rocky Graziano with a bigger punch, basically. But he had no style, couldn't box. He was a wild swinger. He doesn't beat any of the five guys I named.
He dropped Jack.
So Johnson. I don't think anybody's laughing at me, Jack.
He dropped Jack Johnson. But listen, let's. I love talking the old timers, and I want to get on that later. But this past weekend, Frank, what was your take on Jake Paul, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.?
I don't have one, Jack, because I didn't watch 2 seconds of it.
I caught the highlights. I didn't get it. You know what I thought
All right,
was going to happen?
I saw 30 seconds of the highlights. Not enough to speak, but we knew going in that who was going to win. We knew why they were fighting, and the fact that Chavez won the distance, I think, hurts Paul a little bit.
Frank, if someday you and I think we maybe started doing it, we should point to every fighter we could think of, and we had to give them one title, either underachiever, overachiever, nothing in the middle. There'd be some surprises, because a guy like Muhammad Ali would be an underachiever, believe it or not.
Not many people would understand that. They would have to have it explained. But exactly. Yes, I agree with that.
Exactly. And a modern guy who's making news by signing up for bare knuckle fighting, Paulie Malignaggi, he was an overachiever. But some people listen and say, these two guys are idiots. They're rating Malignaggi over Ali, which is ridiculous, which we wouldn't do that. But Julio Cesar Chavez, what a waste of talent. You talk about, if we have to have a category, the laziest fighters, I mean, they don't come lazier than him. He had the talent. Remember the movie Rocky, Mickey Burgess is going over there. You had the talent to be a good fighter, but instead to Chavez Jr., you turn out to be lazy, unmotivated. This guy nearly knocked out Sergio Martinez in Martinez's prime for the middleweight title. He beat John Duddy. He even went the distance with Canelo then, could have done better had he been motivated all along. And now
he just wasn't hungry, Jack, and I don't think he loved boxing like his father. I think he was pretty good at it. He had a name. He kind of had the road paved for him. So he did it, and he knew he could make some money. And look, he just cashed in the other night. Do you have any idea how much money he made? I don't, but I'm sure it's a lot.
But, that's a shame in a way, cashing in on his dad's name like that. if he didn't have the name Chavez, would anyone have given a darn about him to be an opponent for
No.
Jake Paul? And the ironic thing is this: the first 8 rounds of the fight, I didn't see the whole fight. By all reports, all he did was follow Paul around the ring without hardly throwing a meaningful punch. And give Paul this. Would you agree with me? Paul has turned into a competent fighter. Not world class. But he's competent. He's a real boxer now. He's a real boxer. He didn't have an amateur career, so he was having his the equivalent of
learning on the job against
learning on the job.
Setups.
And he's. Would you agree with me? Paul is a very good 8-round fighter right now. A very good 8-round fighter.
Yes, and he's in condition. He's tough. He can punch, and he has a clue on how to box. He's not a street guy. He knows what he's doing.
Right, and the last 2.
And he's getting over, Jack. It's unbelievable. I mean, I had people calling and texting me, asking me if I was getting the fight, and I says, no, I can't watch this guy until he fights somebody that's real.
Yeah, well, he talks about that, but the last 2 rounds of the fight, Chavez finally was throwing meaningful punches, which indicated, Chavez wanted to win by a knockout, and he did. From what I heard, Chavez did win the last couple of rounds. Paul won the first 8, Chavez won the last 2. That's the consensus. And he did nail Paul, a few times, but Paul seems to be a tough guy. It seems at least like he can take a punch. It seems. We don't know for sure. And I'm going to tell you, if Paul were in with this version of, let's say he fought Canelo, the Crawford fight never came up. I really think Paul would give Canelo some rounds. I could see Paul going 7, 8 rounds and getting stopped and maybe winning a couple of rounds. I don't think he would be embarrassed. That's what I'm trying to say.
I haven't watched him enough, Jack, to say, but I don't think that's a reach. Based on what I did see when he was against Tyson and against Fury, I mean, I don't think that's a reach. How much did he and Chavez weigh for this fight?
I don't know the exact weight.
Were they light heavies or super middle? Or were they cruisers?
I think they were in the cruiserweight because he's talking about
Paul's really a big guy.
Fighting Zurdo Ramirez next. Zurdo fought on the undercard. Well, he's not fighting Zurdo Ramirez for 2 reasons. Zurdo brings
Jojo, they were 200 pounds, Jack. To fight Canelo, he would have to get down to 68. Yeah. He has nothing. Now, Canelo would go through him. He can't lose that weight and be effective.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm not telling, I'm asking, Frank.
Thanks, Joe.
Let's say Canelo did fight him. Who would be a bigger attraction? Paul or Canelo? That's
Canelo, but Paul would bring the people, no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Wait. You just said Canelo's a big attraction, but Paul will bring the people more than Canelo.
No, I said Paul will bring his people too. That's what I meant.
I think Paul would be a big attraction. I think all Canelo gets is hardcore boxing fans. I mean, Canelo's a major boxing attraction. I think Paul gets a different crowd. There are very few fights, Frank, that cross over to mainstream, and where they're having parties like it's a Super Bowl party. You had it for Paul and Tyson. It's get-together. It's a social event.
But Tyson carried a lot of that too. Tyson's name carried a lot of that too, Jack. And here's the acid test. Here's the acid test. If Paul and Canelo were fighting on the same night, and you could only see one, who would be the bigger crowd?
Oh, I'd say Canelo. Listen, it depends on the opponent too. Myself personally, I'd rather watch Canelo anytime than Jake Paul. But I'm looking at it as a boxing fan. I'm talking about the average person. Okay, a lot of young people. Paul brings them to the TV sets. It's more than just sport. It's an event.
It's not boxing. It's entertainment. It's a WWE.
look what what we're talking about. We're going to talk a lot about in the coming weeks until September 13th about Canelo and Terence Crawford. We're going to talk about that an awful lot. But look how much we're talking about Jake Paul. I mean, he fought last week, but just the idea, the merits. He's become a name, like it or not. He's been around a while. Paul, I think, is going to continue to pick his spots. And I think he's going to look to fight certain big name fighters who've been off forever. It could be maybe an Andre Ward. He might figure Ward is old. He's been off forever. I can beat this guy because physically he doesn't have it. I still think Ward would be a little too dangerous for him right now, even with the layoff. But they get such money. I mean, Paul and
if Joe Bergman's right, Jack, that would be a massacre, and that he would never fight Benavidez. Benavidez invited Paul to fight him at cruiserweight. That would end Jake's.
No. Don't listen, Paul. If Paul ever made any noise about fighting Benavidez, he just
Benavidez is the one that initiated it, Jack.
Benavidez would slaughter
and Butterbean has even called out Paul. I will say this about Jake Paul, Jack. Let me just say this.
Butterbean's too old. Butterbean's what, 65, 70? I'm
just saying that he called him out. Everybody wants a piece of Jake Paul because of the money. Let me just say this about Jake Paul. And just like with Mayweather, I have my issues with Mayweather. But he was always in shape. He understood. He took it seriously. And he respected the game. I think, I have other issues with him, but I have to say he respected the game, was always in shape, and brought his A game. Jake Paul in a way is kind of a joke, but the fact is this, Jack, no one can deny this. Think about this. He does keep boxing in the spotlight. I mean, people talk about boxing's dead, but yet they'll pay to see this guy. So he has a way of promoting himself and the sport that, he does keep in the spotlight, just like people will get on Canelo. Well, he won't fight Benavidez and he won't fight David Morrell, but we can count on him to fight at least 2 times a year. Anthony Joshua was the same way. We can't do that with Canelo. And at the end of Mayweather's career, he was just like Crawford, 1 fight a year.
Yeah, you said it best. He respects the sport. He trains. He comes in shape, and we'll see. And and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is a name. Did he pose a risk? I didn't think it posed a risk going in. I actually thought, this sounds like a wild prediction, that Chavez would do something wild once again. After 2-3 rounds, he'd just retire on his stool. I thought it would be that type of fiasco. I'll give Chavez some credit. I guess it was an honest effort on his part at this point in his career. He probably hasn't trained for years, Chavez Jr.
No.
And he just maybe started training a couple of months ago for this fight. And it was a question of too little, too late.
Based on what you've told me, the fact that he came on in the last 2 rounds tells me that he didn't bust his rear end to get in shape. He didn't want to get embarrassed. So he saved himself. And then at the end of the fight, so no one could say he mailed it in, he came out and he took a shot and figured maybe he could get lucky and get the stoppage. He didn't, but the fact that he went out hard kind of gets the press and people off of him a little bit. But I think like I said, I don't think he trained hard. I think he trained hard enough not to get embarrassed. And after 8 rounds, okay, well, I have enough left for a good hard 2. I'll try to get lucky. If I do, okay. If not, I save the little face.
Yeah.
Based on not seeing it. On not seeing it.
Yeah. And in the news, there's going to be a very welcome rematch between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Okay, their first fight, Eubank won a very hard-fought decision, a close decision, but it wasn't controversial. Virtually everyone agreed Eubank deserved to win, but virtually everyone agrees it was a close fight as well. I don't know what the weight clause is. Last time Eubank really got down in weight, and his own dad, Eubank Sr., at first said, I don't even want to go to the fight because my son's putting his life in danger by losing all this weight to make it happen. So I don't know what the weight is.
I'll be surprised if he
is.
agrees to that same weight. I'll be, because it was what, 160?
I forgot what I think. Yeah, I think it was lower than that even, because Conor Benn was really a welterweight, and I don't want to say what the exact poundage was, but I'm pretty sure it was under 160 for that fight. And so I don't know. You could say that Eubank Jr. is, if not in the driver's seat, he can control things. He won the first fight. Ben wants a rematch badly. If he's going to have a rematch,
he's not going to fight him at the same weight, Jack. No way.
I would think
Ben needs him more than he needs Ben.
But sometimes money talks. The fight that Eubank Jr. would be in line for would be against Canelo if Canelo beat Crawford. Okay? Because Canelo's already mentioned Eubank's name, and he seems to be an appealing opponent. An opponent that Canelo, would feel that he absolutely can beat. Isn't as much of a threat as a couple of other guys could be. Like you mentioned, Benavidez. Canelo's never going to fight Benavidez unless they offer a crazy deal like $300 million or whatever the heck. Then maybe Canelo steps up at that point.
I hope Crawford beats Canelo so we don't have to see Canelo go through another sideshow.
I meant to ask you this, and I don't know the answer to this, and no one has asked me. Do they have a rematch clause? No one has talked about it, Canelo and Crawford. I can't
Jack, I don't know the answer to that either. I would say if Canelo loses, there'll be a rematch if he wants it, and if Crawford will probably do it. If Crawford loses, there's no rematch.
No, because knowing Canelo, he would not go through with the fight unless he had that insurance policy of a rematch, a clause. That's my feeling. We never hear about these things. Crawford wouldn't have been in position to command a rematch. Now, Canelo's getting reported $150 million, and Crawford's getting a reported $50 million. And Crawford lives a simple life in Omaha. He could retire with his money after this and be comfortable the rest of his life, more than comfortable.
He has 7 kids, so he's going to need the money. That's for sure.
Well, he's made a lot he has gotten about $20 million for the Spence fight, for example. But if Crawford wins, he even indicated this might be it. He might retire, and I kind of believe him. He loves boxing, loves being around the gym. But I could see Crawford being secure enough to walk away from the game. I just don't feel like fighting anymore.
I think it would be a great move. It would be a great move. And Jack, as this fight gets closer, if you think about it, Canelo really does have some pressure on him. Even though he's the bigger guy, there's no rehydration clause. The fact is, if Canelo were to lose, even if it's a 1-point decision, his career is going to be reviewed and viewed so much differently than it is today, because people will sit back and they'll say, okay, some people think, and it's more than some people, a lot of people who hold an opinion that we value believe Golovkin beat him the first time. A lot of people think Erislandy Lara beat him when they fought. Okay, so you can give him 2 losses there. The rematch with Golovkin, there are people that thought that he actually lost that fight. I was cool with a draw or a slight for Canelo, a point for Canelo. We know that Mayweather beat him. If he loses to Crawford, people are going to look at his record and say, who are the best guys he fought? Golovkin, Crawford, Mayweather, and Bivol. And how do you make out? It's big. There's a lot of pressure on Canelo, Jack. If he loses this fight, his legacy is going to really take a hit.
Frank, I'm going to throw you for a loop. I think it's just the opposite. I think there's a heck of a lot more pressure on Crawford, a heck of a lot more. And let me explain why. If Canelo beats Crawford decisively, let's say he does that, no one is going to say Canelo is one of the greatest fighters of all time. No one's going to tell you he's better than Marvin Hagler. No one's going to tell you he's as good as Sugar Ray Leonard. They're not even going to say he's as good as Tommy Hearns. They're not going to say he's as good as Roberto Duran. But if Crawford beats Canelo decisively and then retires, you could put him up there with Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, Duran.
Pound for pound, you can.
Mayweather. Right. You could put him up. You could then make an argument in saying, the greatest fighter that I ever saw was Terence Crawford. You could actually make that argument if you want, if he beats Canelo decisively, because his body of work it has no blips in it hardly at all.
No, people will realize that he was, they'll realize that he was really that good, and he made his opponents look inferior. That's how they'll review his opponents, and you go back and you look at who he fought, and you say, hey, wait, nobody beat him like Crawford did. All these guys, 1 or 2 losses that they say wasn't that good, and they look at Crawford, and it's like, wow, he lapped these guys. He demolished them, and yeah, they lost a couple other fights, but nobody killed them. I couldn't disagree with you more, Jack. The pressure is always on the bigger guy.
No, but
he's
Canelo
supposed to be.
Frank, no matter what Canelo does, he's going to be looked at the same way historically. He's not going to be. He won't.
Not if he loses.
You're right. No, listen. He's not. You are not, Frank, going to consider Canelo at peak value an all-time great, one of the best fighters you've ever seen at peak value. No matter what he does, you're going to look at Ali. You're going to look at Leonard. Guys of your generation. You're going to look at Roy Jones is greater than Canelo. No matter
Jack,
what,
you're making
Crawford, you might not.
Jack,
but if Crawford wins, you might look at him arguably as the greatest fighter of your lifetime. Arguably,
Jack, are you listening to yourself? You made my point. That's my point. That's why Canelo has to win, because if he beats Crawford, they'll say, and I'll say this. This will be the narrative. If Crawford wins the fight, people will say, Mayweather and Bivol exposed Canelo. He cannot beat an elite boxer. We should have seen the handwriting on the wall. If Canelo wins, everybody, including you, will look back and say, well, he didn't look that good against Madrimov, and he was coming up. That's why the pressure is on Canelo. He has to win, because if he wins this fight, yes, it'll be a good win over a great fighter who was 2 or 3 weight classes below him. There's so much pressure on him, because if he loses, he takes a big hit, where if he wins and it's impressive, he maintains his status, maybe goes up a little bit, but he can't lose, Jack. He can't lose.
If Crawford is beaten, especially decisively, you know what his legacy is going to be along the lines of something like a Shane Mosley, maybe something like an Oscar De La Hoya. When we look at De La Hoya, you don't look at him as an all-time great fighter.
No, borderline, but not all-time great.
Right. When I say all-time great, I talk about, of course, the guys I mentioned before, the Leonards, the Durans, the Mayweathers. You could put Mayweather in that slot. If all those guys had to get in a bus and grab a seat, the greatest of our lifetime, there are not a lot of seats left. Mayweather would have a seat. Leonard would have a seat. Duran would have a seat. Hagler would have a seat. Hearns would get on the bus, tell someone to move over, tell someone to get out of the seat, and he would sit down.
I'd have Mayweather on the trailer being pulled by the bus.
Money Mayweather, Money Mayweather would buy the bus and insist on driving it to where he was going.
But Jack, Crawford, this is almost, it's not almost, but there are some similarities. Look at Marvin Hagler. He had to beat Sugar Ray Leonard. He had no excuse. What did that loss hurt him? No, it was a close fight. But Jack, if he wins that fight, nobody says that Carlos Monzon was his equal or greater. but he lost that fight. And look what it did for Leonard. Leonard gets the benefit of the doubt over everybody now.
It helped Leonard, but I'm going to tell you something as crazy as it seems, Frank, because this is the way people think. Had Hagler been given the decision over Leonard, and we both feel Leonard won the fight, so I'm not debating the decision. But there are a lot of people, even though we think they're wrong, who think Hagler should have gotten the decision. That's fine, and there are plenty of them. So had Hagler gotten the split decision over Leonard, Hagler wouldn't have enjoyed the same popularity. The sympathy would have been toward Sugar Ray was robbed. They would have thought Hagler's not that great. He was lucky to get the decision over Leonard, blah, blah, blah.
But he could still claim he won, Jack. That's a big thing, though. He could claim he won. He was a 4-1 favorite. Even if it was won by a point or a 7-5 fight, he could still say, well, Leonard was really good that night and I was off and I still beat him. Just like, look at Lennox Lewis against Klitschko. He was losing that fight, but the record book says he won, and that carries him now. It elevated Klitschko.
It didn't go to a decision, Lewis and Klitschko, and we don't know what would have happened the second half of the fight.
But the 6 rounds they spent in the ring, Jack, Klitschko got the better of it.
But in the 6th round of the fight, Lewis was the one coming on. So we don't know what would have happened in the second half. I see a comment here.
Montrose, if Crawford wins, it's almost as big as Leonard beating Hagler. 46 of 50 sports writers picked Hagler, though. Would be interested in seeing how Alvarez may pick Crawford over Alvarez. I think more than 4 will pick Crawford.
No, exactly. I mean, Leonard beating Hagler was a major surprise to most people because Leonard had only one fight in 5 years, and that one fight against Kevin Howard, he looked awful in that fight. He got knocked out.
And he never fought at 160 before either.
Right.
Just like Crawford.
Right. And a lot of people are going to be picking Crawford. I'm going to tell you, come fight time, Frank, what do you think the odds are going to be, Crawford and Canelo? I think they're absolutely going to be close. It's going to be under 2-1.
Probably 8-5, Canelo.
Yeah, but I could see a lot of late money coming in on Crawford, and it's an intriguing fight. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm in a pickle because I can't be objective about the fight because Crawford is probably my favorite fighter since Sugar Ray Leonard. I know he can win, but I'm afraid if I pick him, I'll jinx him. But if he wins, I won't be surprised. I really won't be surprised. But I could see him losing too. I don't know. It's very, very intriguing. And the other thing is nobody talks about is if Crawford wins, think about this. He's 2 years older than Canelo. He's 37. He'll be 38 a week after the fight.
Yeah, the age works differently on different fighters. What was Mayweather, like 37 years old when he beat Canelo? We don't
36 or 37.
But Mayweather always kept in shape to his credit from when he was a kid. He'd always be in the gym. He'd be in the gym between fights. He respected his trade, you know?
Let me ask you this before the fight. If Crawford were fighting the Canelo that Mayweather fought in 2013, who would you be picking?
I would be picking Crawford, but I thought you were going to ask me a much harder question. The Canelo that showed up for the second Golovkin fight. It's hard to pick against Canelo because he was determined, aggressive. He was like peak value for Canelo. Not that he necessarily deserved the decision over Golovkin in the rematch, even though you could definitely make a case that he did, and he did get it. But he really came ready, fought the fight of his life. If the best version, listen, you want my opinion. If the best version of Canelo shows up, best version, of his career, or the best we've seen so far, I'd pick him to beat Terence Crawford in this fight because I don't think Crawford is quite in his prime not quite, you know. I saw some little signs of slippage before the Madrimov fight. He's got a lot left. Don't misunderstand me. He's a great athlete, and I expect him to show up in top form. But I think Canelo's been slipping a few years. And, you know, and I know I've beaten it to death. That Edgar Berlanga fight was a red flag. And it's going to be a bigger red flag because Berlanga fights his first fight after Canelo on July 12th. And I think Berlanga loses that fight. And when he loses, we're going to think, wow, Berlanga's young, he's in shape. And he loses at the fight after Canelo. How good was he when he fought Canelo? And he gave Canelo a competitive fight. That's, to me, a big red flag.
He's fighting Chiziras, right? Canelo,
Right.
I mean, Berlanga. I think it's a bad style for Berlanga. I think he'll lose a decision, too.
Yeah,
it is. It's a bad style. But, Jack, I'll tell you this. If the Crawford that fought Spence shows up, Canelo's going to have his hands full.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think he beats that version of Terence Crawford. You know what could work in Canelo's favor? Crawford is very methodical. We think of Canelo as being methodical, but Crawford, it never bothers him to give away early rounds.
He can't do that this time, Jack, and he knows that.
He better know that. He can't.
Yeah, he knows that. He can't do that. And the other thing is, he has to take this into consideration too. What are the odds of no personality Terence Crawford from Nebraska winning a close decision over Canelo? I don't think they're good.
No, I don't think that's a fact at all. It catches up to all the great fighters. We heard that about De La Hoya. Oh, no one could get a decision over De La Hoya. And
it only happened one time, Jack. Just the Trinidad fight.
The Shane Mosley rematch.
There's a lot of people think Mosley won that fight. The HBO crew thought he won.
I was at ringside. I had that fight scored a draw. Most people thought De La Hoya should have gotten the decision. I'm just telling you what the consensus
I watched it on TV, and I thought De La Hoya edged it. But a lot of people that were at the fight, that was one of those fights where the people that were there.
No, you're thinking of the first fight. They fought twice.
The second fight at 154. People that watched the fight live felt that Mosley won, but the people that watched it on HBO more leaned towards De La Hoya. The first fight, there was no case for De La Hoya. Mosley clearly won that.
Yeah, and even Muhammad Ali, the first Spinks fight, it was close enough where he could have gotten a decision. I mean, it could have gone either way. And even the first Norton fight, Norton deserved a decision, but it was close enough where Ali could have gotten it. That's the point.
I disagree on both, Jack. I don't think there's any case for Ali getting the first Spinks fight or the first Norton fight.
Well, first Spinks fight.
He didn't even throw punches in for 8 rounds against Spinks. And against Norton, he didn't do that much for 5 or 6 rounds.
Okay, I mean, matter of opinion there, but
I think the 3 Ali Norton fights were scored correctly.
Frank, wouldn't this be great in a sense? Funny, Canelo, let's say he beats Crawford decisively, and in the ring right after, they talk about his next opponent. Jake Paul is in the ring with them talking smack. That would be laughable.
I'll quit watching boxing if that happens.
Let me ask you this: the mindset. We can't get inside their mind, but before, when they first talked about, and it was first mentioned, the possibility of Crawford fighting Canelo, and they mentioned it to Crawford, his initial attitude was, come on, the guy's too big for me. What are you talking about? You know, that was his initial attitude. He just fluffed it off. Look, Canelo's a whole different weight class, way over me. And then as it became more of a reality, he was emboldened, okay? And Canelo himself, when it seemed like he'd never fight Crawford was too small, Canelo would talk glowingly about Crawford, like, wow, what a great fighter. Like, he went out of his way. And now that the two of them are fighting, whose mindset is stronger here? Do you really believe Crawford is ultra confident? He's always ultra confident, it seems. Do you think he's really ultra confident? I have this. I got this 5-1. I'm not even worried about it.
I don't think either guy has that mindset, Jack. even though I think they're both very confident guys and have no doubt they're going to win. I think Canelo may be a little more sure of himself because he has the size and he's probably confident. The only thing that can happen to me is I get outboxed. I'm not going to get knocked out.
Yeah, I want to kind of settle, Frank, like the trouble you were starting on social media with Lyle around Lyle and Ernie Shavers. Let me make my position clear. I've made it clear on social media, but some of these people, they don't read everything, Frank. I made it clear Lyle is a better fighter than Shavers. That was never in dispute. I rank Ron Lyle ahead of Ernie Shavers. He was a better all-around fighter. He was more solid. That's the best way of putting it. You know, he was a better all-around pro. But I was thinking of a 2-year run only when Shavers 77 to 79. The Shavers that Ali said was the hardest puncher he ever fought, you know, and the Shavers who nearly obliterated Larry Holmes with one punch in the fight for the title, and the Shavers that absolutely demolished Ken Norton in a round. That Shavers in the 2-year period, I would have picked over Ron Lyle, who was a move forward fighter and there to be hit. At the time they fought, Shavers was a little short, I feel, of being the Ernie Shavers he later became. Just an opinion there, nothing to get overly riled up about.
Okay, let me just refute your opinion calmly. So you mean to tell me that Shavers was better and hit harder at age 34 than he did 31, and when he fought Lyle, he had 54 fights under his belt. So he didn't hit his peak until he had his 70th fight. Now, Norton was washed up, and it was a bad style. He caught Holmes. Holmes won every minute of every round they fought, except the round that Shavers dropped him. And what was your other thing? What other fight were you talking about? Jack, Ali was a dead man. He couldn't get out of his own way in that fight. If he didn't have a chin, he would have been stopped. What do you think? If Shavers fought the Lyle or the Ali that Lyle fought, he would have got stopped. Ali was never a great fighter after 1975. So, but Jack, here's my issue with what you say. You can say that. You can say anything. You could say Pacquiao could beat Lyle. My only problem with this is, or that statement is, these guys fought relatively close to their prime. And it really wasn't a close fight except for one round. And Lyle showed he could take Shavers' best and totally outboxed him and knocked him out. I mean, I don't like the 10-time point, but Jack, yes, if they fought 5 times, Shavers would beat Lyle. He'd probably catch him in one of those times. But I think the argument for Lyle as a fighter is overwhelming, and I think head-to-head is pretty solid too. That's all.
Okay, but I rate Lyle ahead of Shavers, just for the record. Montrose mentions a question here.
What you like to talk about all the time.
Will Wilder and Joshua fight? And if they do, will it still be a big draw? Yeah, it'll still be a big draw because you're not one of them, Montrose, but there are a lot of suckers out there, and they're going to get all excited over name value. Lyle is a shot fighter. He's got nothing left. I'm going to go a step further.
You mean Wilder?
Deontay Wilder. What did I just say?
You said Lyle.
Wilder. I'm sorry. Deontay Wilder is a shot fighter. Okay? Completely. I'll go a step further. If Wilder, don't laugh. If he fought Jake Paul now, I might pick Jake Paul to beat Wilder now. That's how far gone Wilder is. And I don't want the nonsense to hear on the promos, the last thing a fighter loses is his punch. Well, that's one of the first things I think.
It's the first thing. Jack, I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah.
Because we are in the minority, but we're correct. It's the first thing.
Yeah,
I'm not going to talk about Jake Paul, Jack.
And Joshua ducked Wilder, Eddie Hearn, actually. They ducked Wilder when they were at their peak. They ducked him. Wilder did everything in his power to make a Joshua fight when they were the 2 top heavyweights in the world at that time. Everything in his power Wilder did. Eddie Hearn ducked him. Now Eddie Hearn wants to fight. Oh, gee whiz, it's a big sell. Because
Jack,
Joshua
that's what
doesn't have
happens.
much left now. He has enough left to beat Wilder. Joshua's not a shot fighter. He's just probably, we could describe
And he's
him as
better
a
in
fast
everything.
Yeah.
And Wilder in that last fight, Jack, did not look that good. That right hand did not look that good. I heard the commentator say, well, he's jabbing more and he's boxing more. Well, he had nothing in front of him. He had no resistance. He might as well have shadow boxed.
Joseph Parker,
And as far as Wilder and Joshua, Eddie Hearn's the reason why that fight didn't happen, because Joshua he's taken too many fights with good guys. I don't think he feared Wilder. I think he thought he was going to beat him. Today, there's a good chance. And imagine if Joshua, who can still punch, if he hits Wilder, he will put him in flight if Wilder doesn't get him out first.
Wilder doesn't have the punch to get virtually anyone out. But if you want to match someone with Joshua, that would be a safe fight for Joshua. That would make it a little more acceptable. I got a better match for you. Wilder
Fury
against Joe Joyce. Let Wilder fight Joe Joyce. Two guys past their peak. They have very little left. I think Joyce has a little more left than Wilder has, for sure. And if Joyce wins, it's a great fight in England. Joe Joyce against Joshua. You have your name value for England. I don't want to see Wilder fight anyone. Wilder didn't win a round against Joseph Parker, but at least he went the distance. Zhang, the Chinese heavyweight. I mean, he obliterated Wilder. So that's two bad losses in a row where Wilder showed very little. And then Wilder...
he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights.
Yeah, I could forgive him for... one of the Fury losses was a very bad loss. He got completely dominated. The third fight with Fury, I give Wilder credit in the sense he knocked Fury down a couple of times. Yeah, and he left it all in the ring. He showed tremendous heart.
Let me make a point about that, Jack. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this. I really believe the third Wilder fight with Fury had the same effect on both he and Fury as the Thriller in Manila did on Ali and Joe. They were never the same after that. And I think that and Wilder took a beating in that fight, he hit Fury with some hellacious shots that just rippled his whole body. I don't think either guy has ever recovered from that fight and has ever been and will ever be what they were that night. And I think that it's the same thing as the Thrill Manila. Those guys went there as great fighters, came back as old men, and that was the case with Fury and Wilder.
See, we disagree to a point. Hard fights can take something out of a fight. I'm not arguing that, but I think it's much more mental than physical. I don't think what they went through physically to say, well, they're never the same. The emotions are not the same. Now, no fighter ever put out more in a fight. We both agree on this than Joe Frazier on March 8th, 1971 against Ali. No fighter ever put out more. But when the fight was over, you put out that much. How do you duplicate it again? Not so much, you have a layoff physically a little bit afterwards, but then you could come back physically. You could be fine like a month or two later, but mentally, you just can't get back to that level ever again.
Jack, I disagree a little bit. I think the physical pounding takes a lot out of you. I mean, that Wilder Fury fight, that won 11 rounds, and they hit each other. And like Ali and Frazier in Manila, they couldn't miss. Everything they threw at the other guy big, they landed. I mean, when Wilder went down, he crashed, and Fury crashed a couple times. I thought he was out. I don't think the body was meant to take that kind of a beating over a prolonged period. And I think at their ages, they both weren't young men. They were in their mid-30s. I really do think that pushed them both off the cliff as far as being close to what they were. It looks like it pushed Wilder a little further because he was giving up 40 or 50 pounds, but neither one are a factor in today's game, which brings me to 2 points I want to make. And the other one is just quick, and that's this one. I have an argument with a friend of mine who's a great historian and a great boxing mind. And I tell him that if Usyk retires undefeated, and say he's going to beat Dubois, say he wins 2 more fights against other top contenders and retires 27-0 or whatever, he's going to go down as one of the all-time great heavyweights and maybe in the top 10.
I see what you're saying, Frank. This is in all sports, not just boxing. You know, you get a legendary fighter and a legendary athlete, and no one's allowed to pass him. For example, we're not allowed to say someone's a better running back than Jimmy Brown, can we? We're not allowed to do it. We're not allowed to really say anyone's necessarily better than Michael Jordan, and maybe no one was. We're not allowed to say someone is better than Wayne Gretzky. We're not allowed.
We couldn't say anybody was better than Joe Montana until Tom Brady came along.
Okay, but now we won't be allowed to say there's anyone better than Brady. I understand what you're saying, you know, but Sandy Koufax, great. We're not allowed to say there's a better pitcher than Sandy Koufax. But the point I'm trying to make, there's Jack Dempsey. Usyk's accomplishments would have been better than Dempsey's, but Dempsey was legendary, so people aren't going to put Usyk ahead of Dempsey. You know, Usyk's accomplishments would have been better than Marciano's when you think of it, when you look at it, but we won't be allowed to put Usyk ahead of Marciano. We just won't be allowed.
I don't know about that, Jack. How about we look at it this way? Since Lennox Lewis retired, he fought in 202 and 203. So he's basically been retired this century. We're a quarter of the way in. So from Lennox Lewis until today, who's the best heavyweight?
Well, you know, it'll come down between Usyk and Lennox Lewis. But
no, forget Lennox Lewis. He's gone. I'm saying since him. So you have the Klitschko's, you have Fury. Who else am I leaving out?
Well, look at Vladimir Klitschko. What was it, 20 title defenses or so?
And 10 years undefeated.
But people are going to point to the level of opposition. He didn't have a legacy fight, unfortunately. I mean, there were no, at the end of his career, losing to Fury, then having the fight of the year against Joshua, but he was past his best at that point, 40 years old. And
Jack, my point is this. Usyk, if he retires undefeated, he beats Dubois and say he wins 1 or 2 more fights, he will be able to say he cleaned out 2 divisions. And nobody will say he didn't fight the best Joshua. He didn't fight the best Fury, but they were still pretty good and he beat them. And then you take into consideration his style where he's so versatile and he can adapt and he matches up good with everybody. I mean, if I have to pick who wins at their best between Vladimir Klitschko and Usyk, I may take Usyk. I saw that he can beat Fury. And he might be Vitaly Klitschko. His resume, he's going to have it covered, Jack. He's going to have the numbers, and then people are going to say, look, he goes on the road. He's moved up in weight. He can box. He's fought all kinds of styles, and he's adaptable. I think he's going to – if he retires undefeated, that's going to – he might make the top 10. I'm not saying he does or does not belong. I'm just saying in years to come that he will be in the conversation.
Yeah, and it's circumstance if a guy fights primarily in one division. So we could rate him as heavyweights, whatever. But like an example, we were talking before, if someone said Roberto Duran's the greatest lightweight of all time, they'd have an argument. That's fine. He was a lightweight. If they said Leonard was the best welterweight, fine. He was primarily a welterweight. If they said Hagler was the best middleweight, fine. But there's also a pound for pound thought. And if I said to you, Frank, for example, I think Roy Jones is better than all of them, pound for pound. You could disagree, absolutely disagree, but you can't tell me I'm being ridiculous or dismiss it. You'd have to.
No, he's one of the most gifted fighters ever.
Exactly, but he doesn't have a division. He doesn't have a division. And a lot of people are going to say about Usyk and Holyfield, they're not going to want to rate them as heavyweights. So they're going to say, well, I think Holyfield was the greatest cruiserweight of all time. Or they're going to say Usyk, I think he was the greatest cruiserweight of all time. They're going to look for, to reassign him somewhere else because they don't want to rate him as a heavyweight. How do you rate Holyfield as a heavyweight? It's hard. How do you rate Holyfield compared to Sonny Liston at heavyweight, for example? It's hard to make a comparison.
But I have them close though, because it's not like Holyfield didn't do anything at heavyweight. I mean, he beat Mike Tyson twice.
Heavyweight.
It's like I rate Holyfield as the greatest cruiserweight, and he's in the top 10 heavyweights. And I think that they're going to say that about Usyk. And the thing that Usyk has going for him, Jack, is the world we live in. He's undefeated, and he's a good boxer, and he was giving up size in all of his big fights, and he overcame that. I'm telling you, they're going to say that about him. And you know something, Jack? We should embrace him because what do we hear all the time? These heavyweights are too big for the guys of the past. Well, you know what? I'm not sure that that's the case. I mean, Usyk is the same height and weight as Muhammad Ali. So if Usyk could win in this era, well, why couldn't Ali?
Oh, no. Sometimes we discussed this before. You have an athlete that's just ahead of his time. And we hear, for example, about the 1970s. Oh, those NBA players, they couldn't compete with the athletic guys today. Really?
That's LeBron's fans that say that, Jack.
Right, but you get Dr. J. You mean to tell me Dr. J is not going to dazzle and be the same today? And you mean to tell me Ali would be every bit as effective today as he was in his prime back then?
See, you can talk about that, and I can talk about that because we saw Dr. J in his prime. We've seen Jordan and Bird and whatnot. And I think we're more qualified to talk about that. But you know what? I can't talk about George Mikan or Sam Jones or guys like that. So I think when you grew up in the era and you saw both guys, it's like me trying to tell my nephews that Sugar Ray Leonard was better than Floyd Mayweather, or trying to tell them that Michael Jordan was greater than LeBron James. So it's interesting, Jack, and we have to pick up on this. Let me just get the other thing out.
Yeah.
There's talk of a fight happening that matches one guy who's a little bit unknown, but in his last fight, he kind of arrived, and another guy who is undefeated, who we don't like, and it's at a weight that is going to be for the guy who is arriving. And I'm talking about, there's talk that Brian Norman is going to fight Devin Haney. Jack, I want that fight to happen because Brian Norman will retire Devin Haney.
I'm going to tell you, Frank, I held myself accountable. You didn't do it. You didn't give me a dig about it, about Devin Haney. I thought he was going to be a generational talent. I thought he'd be along the lines of something like in the class of a Pernell Whitaker when he was on the way up. And no, does he?
I want
Brian
that fight
Norman?
to be made, Jack.
It might happen. I mean, they're fighting,
and they're talking about on the undercard of Jack. They're talking about putting that on the undercard of Ortiz and Boots.
That's a heck of a card.
Yes, it is.
I mean, yeah.
And Haney and Norman.
Yeah, we don't have much time on it, but Haney would have been a big favorite not long ago. But now
Norman will stop him, Jack.
You wonder whether Haney will be the same after the Garcia fight, regardless of the circumstances. I think that took something out of him.
If Garcia could knock him down 3 times, Norman will knock him through the ring.
Okay.
Thanks,
Frank.
Joe. Thanks, Montrose.
Good show.
All right, thanks, Jack.
Joe.
We'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we will see you next week.